So first up, let's bring out Jen Malone from Atlanta. Jennifer Pyken from This Is Us. Robin Urdang from The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And Jonathan Nolan from Westworld. Congratulations. You guys are all Emmy nominees. I think one of the important things in many ways about this whole process is getting to know people a little bit. So I just want to very quickly kind of turn to each of you and just get a little bit of a sense of like, how did you first recognize music in a project and get a sense of like something about this was really exciting to you? So Robin, why don't we start with you? Okay, we're going to start with Jonathan.
Thank you.
By request. Well, you mentioned this a little bit, earlier, but tell me a little bit about like when did you first notice music? You said this was an important part.
Well, I noticed the lack of it.
Ah.
I worked with my brother for many, many years on films. I was a screenwriter, and I kept pestering him to try to put music into the movies. Specifically, I wanted to get the Rolling Stones tune "Paint It Black" into one of the Batman movies that we were working on. So I spent 10 years working on Batman movies. And every movie, I would say, we got to use Paint It Black. Even just for the trailer. You got to do one. Everyone lose their minds. It's amazing. And he didn't. So I started doing TV so I could put that song into a TV show twice.
So this is basically a really long avenue to become a music supervisor, basically.
Yes, we went the long way around. No, I'm here at, the Emmy nomination on Westworld is wonderful. It's pseudonymous for our show. Sean O'Mara is the name that we submitted as a respect for the position. We have a unique set of challenges on our show, which means I sort of take more of the lead in this role than ordinarily I would be comfortable, because we're trying to pick the music sometimes months or years out so that it can be adapted, rearranged. I have a very unusual relationship with Ramin Djawadi, my composer, longtime collaborator on the show. We've been working together since Batman Begins, for 15 years or so. And we start kind of scheming up, cooking up what we're going to do with the music, because it rolls back and forth between his score and the songs that we pick, that we then arrange, which the balancing act, trying to figure out how on earth you're going to, at what point do you approach the artist? At what point do you, how much do you invest in this thing before it falls apart? Sometimes it falls apart. So it's sort of a unique set of challenges. So we work very closely on that. But the nomination is a sort of recognition of all the people on the show who contribute in that capacity.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I know it's a unique situation. I think we talked about this earlier. One of the things that's very confusing about music supervision is that, people love to ask who picked that song, And in many ways, like, it all comes down to, oh, that's the mastermind that chose it. And the complexity is that for us as supervisors, we have to kind of always articulate that there's a lot more to it than that there's a lot of factors. So since we're already kind of diving in, let's talk a little bit about Westworld and just a little bit about how does that assemble? Like you mentioned, there's a long gestation period. Do you have a sense of how the team works?
It starts with Lisa and I, who run the show together. I'm on her episode. She had a very, very clear idea. She directed this season. Had a very, very clear idea of what music she wanted. She told me, "Fuck off." Pardon me.
You can swear.
But thank you. Good. I had gotten used my first show on CBS. The dam finally burst, and we were able to use popular music because my brother wasn't around to say no. And we started finding a balance between Ramin. Ramin was my collaborator on that show as well. Fantastic. Brilliant composer, and a lovely human being, just a wonderful person. We sort of keep it all in the family, with a small intimate team working together. Ramin and I start a long way out, and it's analogous to the relationship that my brother has with Hans Zimmer, where sometimes we'll start composing the music. On Interstellar, Hans was composing the music while Chris was writing the script, which is a really fun. It's when you can set off in the same direction from the beginning with the music. To me, the music is, neck and neck with the picture.
Yeah, it's baked into the cake.
It's vital to what you're doing. I watch fantastic shows where they have no music, they have no score, and I think, God, wouldn't it be better if you could just add a little
missed
bit
opportunities.
More? Yeah, just throw Paint It Black in there a couple more times. No, so for us, it's from the beginning. I want to stop talking in a second because I want to hear what these guys have to say. here more out of respect than anything else. But, I think for us, we start thinking about the music at almost exactly the same time we start thinking about the scripts. Lisa and I talked about what season 3 would be years ago, so we have a blueprint for it. We're starting to talk about what the episodes will look like, but we've already got 5 songs picked out, and I'm incredibly excited about that. I know which one plays in which mode. It's sort of, you have, sometimes when you're writing and you're directing, you can build a center of gravity around an image, a moment, a line. For me, as often as not, it's a piece of music that's guiding you into it. And with the show, uniquely, we kind of knew with the player piano as a motif, as almost a character in the show, we knew that those arrangements of music would be sort of a key part of it.
And that's sort of an interesting aspect of Westworld in particular, too, because you would imagine a show that is essentially a sci-fi with a Western angle, and obviously it's transforming into much more than that. It would be a very difficult place to have source music play a role, in essence, because, you don't have music supposedly at the time period and so forth. And it seems like you guys have found a very clever way of allowing the storytelling aspect of music to kind of play a role through. Atlanta, as an example, is like a show which you would automatically think would be kind of wall-to-wall music opportunities. And I would imagine you're struggling, with clearances. I mean, I've dealt with hip-hop before, and I've always wanted to have a hardcore hip-hop project, and no one ever hires me on them. And now when I see when they're done properly, I'm so envious because I don't know how you can handle the difficulties to it. So I'm kind of curious a little bit about your process on that.
Yeah, no, you really don't want to do a hip-hop show. You don't. I mean, you just go through it, and then after the show's done, it's like I wake up and I'm just like, okay, what just happened? Because it's just so fast. We're mixing episodes weekly, and stuff is getting locked in, and it's not cleared because I got a guy in jail, or this kid's not getting back to me on text, because everything with rappers and hip hop is done through text, like taking pictures of the quote request, of them signing it and sending it to me, the W-9s and all that. But we work the same as probably you guys do, as far as like, you get the script, you read it through, the stuff that's scripted in, you have to immediately start working on clearance. And then as the episode comes together, we just find the moments, hey, we need a song for this. Hey, is this going to clear? How much is this going to cost? And we just kind of all just collaborate and just put it all together. And then clearances are just, it's intense. It's very, very intense, but I'm really good at finding people.
Let's talk about Teddy Riley, because that's sort of one of those, did I get the name wrong? No, the episode which had the Stevie Wonder clearance in it.
So we had, the episode that's nominated for Donald for Best Actor and Hero for Directing is Teddy Perkins.
Teddy Perkins, right.
And we got the script, and it was bookended with 2 Stevie Wonder songs. And, spoiler alert, the final scene is a murder-suicide. And Stevie Wonder is, rightly so, very conscious and very specific about where he wants his music used. So we had to send the quote request out, early, and Donald wrote the episode. So, and
you clear the one where he's in the truck first, and then the murder-suicide later, or did you just hit them both?
we sent them both, and at the same time. And there was definitely some questions and concerns, and we knew that going in, because again, on paper, and because we cleared it, or tried to clear it before it was shot, and so we just knew that there was going to be some finessing with this one. So we did send the request, and again, on paper, and there's a murder-suicide song plays over a murder-suicide, and they get dragged out. So we just, it was there was conversations with Donald as far as like, you might have to make a call on this one. And we've never asked Donald to make a call on anything, because it's just not his job. But we ended up getting the episode to Stevie and his people, and then they got on the phone. And apparently it was the most amazing conversation ever. Stevie was telling Donald all about the making of the record and just experiences and tours way back. And we were all like, God, I would have loved to have been on that phone call. And we got him. And I know that they're very excited about the use. Sony ATV called me like a month ago, or maybe before the nominations. We're like, can you send us a bunch of DVDs of the episode? And so we did. So that was challenging.
Was it cleared when you were shooting, or was it cleared after you started shooting?
After.
Yeah, that's nerve-wracking. What was your plan B? Did you have one?
No.
Yeah.
I've had that.
No.
Let's hear about, Robin, let's hear about your
I've had it. They were shooting an episode of Marvelous. I get really nervous talking in front of people. I'm sorry. They were shooting an episode of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and we were in Paris, and I wasn't there, but they were in Paris, and I gave Amy and Dan some songs, and Amy picked one, and she loved it, and I couldn't clear it. It was French, and French music, you have to clear. It's not like American.
You got to speak to every member of the family. You got to send them cheese.
Yeah, you have to.
It takes 8 months.
So it was 3 days before we were shooting, and we were doing our rehearsal because it was a big. It's a spoiler alert. I don't think I'm allowed to say anything. It was a big number. And I said, Amy, I need to give you an alt. I mean, she said, nope. I said, it's not clear. She goes, nope, we're shooting it anyway. It's like, okay. I got it cleared at about 4:00 in the morning the night before we shot. So it was, and if she shot it, there was nothing we could do. And it wasn't, we didn't know.
By the way, a message to filmmakers, listen to your supervisors. Like, if you can't clear it, it's going to cost a lot of money to redo. And I've been in that spot too before. Like, we just had this with an ABBA song on Better Call Saul. And I thought that was God telling me, don't talk about this. But it is one of those things where it's terrifying. And it's one of those things where you don't ever want to go to a filmmaker and say, I know this is how you built this entire thing in mind. I know that this is the only thing you can imagine, but we got to work together to come up with a plan B that we might be able to abandon later on. And that's a very, very hard dialogue to have. And we're pretty resourceful people. I mean, I would say as far as our processes go, like, I'm very proud of the creative work that I do, but I also feel like the people that I work with and the relationships my company has built and how we pull miracles out of a hat has to do with everybody's individual extraordinary determination and hard work and organization and capacity to be, convincing at the right place at the right time. It's a terrifying.
But it's also
thing.
Worse when you give them the music and then say,
yes.
But I gave it, and I said it's not pre-cleared. It's like, but
here's the caveat. Well, Jen, let's talk about This Is Us. This is like a show that has become, a phenomenon on so many different levels, and I'm really kind of curious from your vantage point, like, how do you first discuss the music part? Like, when does music begin to be part of the conversation?
Well, first of all, I worked with Dan Fogelman, who's the creator of This Is Us, on a TV show before called The Neighbors. I don't know if everyone remembers that show on ABC, a really sweet comedy. So I already had a musical language with him. I kind of knew his taste. We had, I did, I think, 13 or 14 episodes with him before I came onto the pilot of This Is Us. So the pilot, a lot of the songs on the pilot were chosen before I came on. The Sufjan Stevens, which is like one of my favorite artists. So I was super happy that they were putting it in, and the La BC Free song, Watch Me, was already chosen like pre the pilot. And then I kind of filled in everything else, which was like a Selena Gomez song. I put an indie artist, PPLRS, Damian Rice, and Adam Cohen. So the pilot kind of set up sort of the sound of the show because we were going back and forth in time. We played songs from the 70s that actually went over scenes that were present day. So we kind of set up the sort of how the show was going to go from the pilot. And then Dan, really trusts me, and he trusts my music taste. And I work super closely with the editors, and I start very early on. When we turn, I start picking music in the script stage and start putting them in edit. Now, sometimes it works out great and the songs work, and sometimes the cut comes back and it looks so different than it's cut differently and it looks different. And my great idea was not the greatest idea, but it was, I go back to the drawing board. And that's a lot of what you do as a music supervisor, is going back and playing stuff to picture. It's a really fun show to work on. We have so many music fans and so many artists love our show. I'm a plan B person, so even if a song I think is going to clear, like Van Morrison was something that was a very difficult clearance, he doesn't clear, and it took a long time, and I'm like, let's have a plan B. And they're like, you get everything done, Jennifer, we're not worried. And I'm a bit of a worrywart, so I was like, here's some other options, just pick another option and I can get it clear, in a day before another big song. So it did clear, And then so every time I clear something and they think it's going to clear, I'm like, okay, I pulled another rabbit out of the hat. But it can happen that it doesn't clear.
We had the same thing with Tracy Chapman,
Tracy
which
Chapman,
was the
yes,
whole thing
yes.
on with the Nicki Minaj. So Tracy Chapman does not clear.
Yes, it's true.
She does not clear, but my editor put her in the second to last episode, and we were actually moved on to the next. He was done. He was wrapped, and Fam, my co-music supervisor, and I were just like, they have to. Here's some great replacements, and they're like, nah, you'll get it. You'll get it. And I'm like, but this is something I cannot control. This is not finding someone, and this was not something that, and this was my spoiled editor, not Donald or Hero. But the lawyer came back and she was just like, I cannot believe this, but Tracy's good. You're cleared. Now it cost an exorbitant amount of money, and we were not cleared for any promos whatsoever, no in or out of context.
But you'll be summering with Tracy in the Tahiti at this point.
I mean, so me and Tracy are like this. No, so everybody was just really shocked that we got it. But I think a lot of the stuff, and I'm sure you guys can relate to this, is that it's because it's Atlanta.
Well, I mean, what's interesting too, I mean, Jonathan, you have, Radiohead in there, you have Nirvana in there. I mean, you have a lot of music that is notoriously difficult to clear. Have you found it in situations where, like, you've set something up, you have in your own mind that it's going to work really well, and you've done the adaptation, and then you look at it in the edit and you're like, ooh, I don't know if this is such a great idea. Because I imagine that must happen at times. Or do you feel like it's actually, you're hitting, the batting average has been good overall?
For us, it's been okay. It's been okay. Very good. Peggy Lee's the one that got away.
Say again, what's that?
Peggy Lee.
Peggy Lee?
I just walked past her star on the
Hollywood
Walk of Fame. Broke my heart.
She's the one that got
She wouldn't.
She's the one that got away. The writer, her estate was okay with it. I shouldn't go too far down the line with it. But you got a lot of people that you got to make happy.
Yeah.
And that one fell apart with one permission. Absolutely broke my heart. But we got some extraordinary music. I mean, everyone's like, is all the music from the '90s because it's another timeline and we're actually in the '90s? I'm like, no, it's because I went to high school in the '90s.
Right.
This is all my favorite music.
I stopped listening to music when I started making movies.
A little bit. I need to catch up a little bit more. No, part of the reason for that is what we're trying to do with the music is twofold. We're gently reminding the audience that we are not in a period thing. We're in a meta western, which is composed of film reference and music reference. It's Gesamtkunstwerk with a bunch of artists' shit that we're stealing and throwing into it because that's what Anthony Hopkins' character would have done. And it's commentary about what those movies meant and what these songs meant, how it all plugged together. Second thing we're doing with it is if the hook isn't recognizable, it doesn't survive the arrangement. We didn't use, with one or two exceptions, the second season we were bouncing around, but through 20 episodes, you really didn't hear the original version of the song until the last 2 minutes of the second season. In part because that was our transition out of our meta world into the world. Or unless, I think it's the world. Lisa hasn't told me if it's actually the world. So what we're trying to do with the music in part is we're also trying to remind the audience that they are programmed themselves. They're of their own software, which is the second you hear a song you recognize, you start to fill in the lyrics. And the lyrics inform a little bit of the experience you're having. If you don't recognize the song, it kind of doesn't work. There's an awful lot of obscure music that I would love to use. It doesn't quite work. By the time Ramin, we work with a fantastic music editor who we keep not uniquely, but it was something I inherited from Bad Road. We have a music editor on staff throughout, so the editors aren't actually recklessly throwing in songs. We're working very closely with our music editor and with the editors. It really is a collaborative environment. But Chris Keller, our music editor, is often there. We're rolling these things out. Sometimes about half the music in the show has been planned months or years in advance. Wu-Tang Clan we used in episode 5, but it was choreographed. One of our stars, Rinko, had to do an entire dance that was built around the rhythm of the song. I had started with Jizzit is Genius. Could not find a track on there. Uniquely with hip hop, it can be challenging. So there's so much rhythmic quality that's recognized about the songs. When Ramin would try to do an arrangement, and we go back and forth on which piece of the song and how we wanted to approach it and what the feeling we wanted to convey. So,
is the
it's
vocal
2 degrees
the
removed
hook?
from
Is
it.
the bass line is the hook?
Exactly.
Like, which part of it are you going to tap
Exactly.
into?
We wound up with Cream because the Charmel's hook that's in there,
Yeah.
and it did clear, crossed my mind at least at one point where I'm like, we could just clear the Charmels. It's just, but that's not. Luckily, it cleared, and that melodic hook, which is unique in that song, was the one that really connected. We demoed. This is 6 months before we shot anything, trying to figure out which song would work. Got it cleared. Got the dance choreographed, put together. Then had to find. Ramin had to do the 16th century Edo arrangement of it. He loved it. He went out and bought a bunch of Japanese instruments. So that was a trip for him. Got it figured out. Worked with the choreographer. Put it all together. I mean, it was every step of the way, kind of tightrope. Going, well, we don't have a backup for this, and that that's my job is to have the other things that I know that I'm going to be okay with if the whole damn thing falls apart. I mean, we wouldn't ever. I'm learning all sorts of stuff here. Clearly, we should just have kind of shot it, and then I would have to answer to myself afterwards. Like, what? No, Jennifer Reeve, who works with us on Clearance, is lovely. We're able to get it all together in the end. But it's a tightrope when you've committed to something creatively and you absolutely can't see past it. It's very tricky.
It's a little bit like working an iambic pentameter. You have a structure that you now have no flexibility on. You got to fall within that structure, which means you're either going to make the most of those creative decisions, and then luckily, if you have an entire team, you have everybody now bending into that. So it's kind of like if you do a period piece, you're like, okay, we are in a very specific window, which means that we have a limited palette that we can work with, and we have a certain limitations on budget and on time and on the sophistication level of the characters, and to some degree the sophistication level of the showrunners. So you have a process. You have to figure out how do you get it right in the pocket, and if you get it done early, what seems really exciting, especially in the situation of Westworld, is like, okay, we have to choose this. We got to choose a path. That path is now in. Now I have a whole set of departments that are all going to try to find a way to bend the creative vision to make that work, which means that your idea has to be really clean from the get-go because everybody has to find a way to hook in on it to make it work. Yeah. And I would imagine that you get feedback also from others where they're like, can you please stop putting in Radiohead because it's making my life really miserable?
No, everyone seemed, but we didn't quite realize how much Radiohead we had in the first season until we got to the end. And one or two occasions that wasn't totally, when I was directing on the last one, I didn't have, we were up against it. So I hadn't, it's a long, boring story. The finale of the first season was at the end of kind of an extraordinarily difficult process to get there with Lisa and I running the show, and I directed the pilot, I directed the finale. By the time we got to the finale, which was literally the equivalent of kind of like landing the plane with the fucking wings snapped off and the thing's on fire. You're throwing shit out the windows. You
sullied it.
Yeah, a little bit. I don't know about that. But we got there, and I hadn't had a chance. Having thought fetishistically about the music for the entire season, I hadn't thought about it at all. And so we got the editor's cut back. Andy, the editor on the episode, extraordinary. Working with Chris. By that point, they kind of figured out the shit that was working. So we watched it, and there were a couple of temp tracks in it, and I'm really not keen on temp stuff. I think it's incredibly temp score is hugely problematic in there. You're trying to find an original voice for the music in the show. You don't want to imitate someone else's.
Or handicap, your composer to limit what they're able to bring.
And it can be very damaging, and then you wind up chasing. You can actually hear it. One of my brother's great gifts is that he can always tell you exactly which piece of music they had temped when they've gone chasing the. I mean, sometimes it's abundantly clear, but sometimes you actually see it in the picture pattern.
Well, it's clear that he doesn't listen to anything but score.
No, him and Hans are off on some fucking planet somewhere of pure music, which is lovely.
Well, let's talk about covers. I mean, Jennifer, you have a lot of covers in your show, and how do you go through the process of figuring out, how a cover is going to be handled or how the performance and, as far as being able to also kind of guide the production through the process of doing on cameras? I imagine that's a whole series it's a whole ball of wax, as they say.
Well, with a lot of our covers, we're getting them recorded before the show. While we're in edit, sometimes I've had them done beforehand. I've had demos done. To give you one example, there's a song called Beauty and Pain, which was in an episode, which is a blue sky, green sky bluegrass song, which is a bluegrass song. And we wanted to get it done in a singer-songwriter mode. And we also wanted a change of lyric. So we had to get that cleared beforehand because we didn't want to go get the song covered and then go back to the writer and say, we made a change in your song, and then they say no, or they'll charge you an exorbitant amount of money. So I reached out to their manager, and he hadn't seen This Is Us. He had heard about it. And so I said, do you want to watch some episodes? And that week there was an episode airing. I think he was like a new dad too. So he probably didn't have a lot of sleep, I think. So he went and watched an episode, and I was waiting to hear back from him. I didn't hear back from him. So I figured I'd pick up the phone and call him, check in again, as the clock is ticking. And he said, I loved the episode. I watched an episode, and there was a Bill Fay song in there, and he actually covered a Wilco song. And so he actually was like excited that we wanted to cover a Green Sky Bluegrass song. And I said, we're going to go out to a few indie artists and have it covered, and I'll get back to you. And this is like, we were going to do this for an episode that was like, say it was like episode 206 or 207. Well, we didn't end up using it till like 213. So I went and got it covered, and I sat on it for a while. And Hannah Miller, who we ended up using, did a cover for us. She's a Nashville singer-songwriter. She did this like raw, organic, she made it her own. She made the song her own. So we went from this bluegrass song to her own, and I sent it to the manager, and he loved it. And when the show aired, it was really exciting because the Green Sky Bluegrass fans, they have this like rabid fan base, loved it too. So that was like a really cool, right. And then it gave the song another life. So that's one example.
Yeah, you don't want fans showing up at your house, especially from that band. Well, Maisel to me is like, you look at it, it's like looking at how it's like trying to talk to the cinematographer on like Goodfellas. You're like, oh my God, can you please show me what you're doing on this thing? So explain a little bit about how this process works, because it seems crazy.
Amy and Dan, they write the scripts. We get the scripts. They have some music scripted. They had Barbra Streisand scripted in the pilot. I would never have given them a Barbra Streisand song. She doesn't clear. It took 2 months with the huge help from Pace over at Sony, and the manager and Amy had to write a letter, and we had to show them the scene. And my co-producer sent the scene over, and I guess he sent it over to Sony, and he called me up. He said, somebody in Malibu opened it. I went, that would be Barb. And about 10 minutes later, we got the approval. So that I mean, they know what they want. It's a period movie, and Amy and Dan, they use music, and whatever they shoot to music. So whatever we have, they're shooting to, which you can see. It's like they have dancers as extras because they like the way dancers move. It's period. It's obscure music. Some of it's not so obscure. Some of it's really tough to find for them. Some of it's tough to clear. Nobody knows who owns anything, and you've got to like drill it in their head and say, you own this. I promise you own this. Here, I promise it's yours. Oh yeah, it is. So we go through that all the time.
How do you go through listening? Because like what I love about period projects is I get a chance to just dive into a decade or into a window. But I also realize that as fun as that is, a lot of times I find out I can't clear any of it because we just don't have the budget for it.
Well, we have a budget.
You have a budget.
Amazon's great. Amazon's really behind the project. We love Amazon.
God bless HBO. God bless Amazon. Any other God bless?
We do love Amazon. So we can get, and everybody's really working with us because they love the show.
Right.
I mean, they want their music used. It's not like this music gets used often. So, I don't know what else to say.
Yeah.
I love working with them. I love the show. It excites me. It's tough as nails. It's a huge challenge, but it shows. I mean, everything they do shows on the screen. Everything. There's not one little, I can't give them a song for a library song. They won't use it. If it's not authentic, it's in the garbage. So it's huge.
When they were budgeting it, I mean, was it a conversation that you were a part of, or was it more like?
No, the pilot was done. They started the pilot before. Well, they had the script for the pilot and dealt with Amazon, and they had 3 songs scripted. I think it was the Peggy Lee, the Barbra Streisand.
All right, Jonathan.
Oh yeah, we got Peggy Lee a few times, Jonathan. Sorry, few of them. should have had.
I never thought the dude from Westworld would find out what he can't get from another member of our panel.
Yeah, so it was Peggy Lee, Barbara Streisand, and I think it was Benjamin Britten. Was it Benjamin Britten? Yeah, they were scripted. So they put in music in that script to show Amazon, this is what we're looking for. This is what the sound is going to be. This is what we want. This is what budget we need. So we had a budget and we sort of worked with it and, pulled from a few other places. And the music is a character. The music is part of the show. The music is huge. I mean, it's huge. It's just as big as any character, except for Rachel.
Yes, of course. Nobody can compete there.
Nobody can compare to Rachel.
What about with Westworld? I mean, I imagine, do you feel like there are limitations financially on your front? Or is it one of those things where that conversation doesn't really come into play because you're luckily also the showrunner?
No, it comes into play. No, sadly, the daily reality was something I learned on broadcast was the perp and the license fee and the worldwide perpetuity clearance, like that money is the very last pot of money that the showrunner can use to get themselves to budget. It's the very last thing. Right. That and vis effects. In a show without a lot of vis effects. So you get to the end of the episode and someone dropped the ball somewhere. They had to go a half day over. They missed a stunt sequence. They go back and get it. There goes your song that you've been thinking about for 6 months. And there's Greg Plageman and I, who ran Person of Interest together for years, and we didn't have a ton of money, so we picked, again, if we had a real budget, then we'd need a real music supervisor because it is an extraordinarily difficult job when you're only able to put in a song every other episode or so. You can hand pick it, work your way through it. We wound up paying for a song ourselves out of pocket. It was Pink Floyd.
You get water right at your feet if you need it.
No, I already drank all of it.
All right. Can we get another water for the man,
That's
please?
right. I'm terrible at these things. No, it's Pink Floyd, Welcome to the Machine, and we're like, we're not putting this in the fucking show. We spent 3 seasons. No, I'm good. Thank you, Tom. I said we're not putting it in the show. We have to have it. It was a finale, and we were so consider the last bucket of the money in the 22nd episode of the season. That's the last little bit where you can say, look, we made it. We were on budget. And we thought, okay, so we paid for it ourselves.
And when it comes to like renewals, I mean, that becomes a big factor. I mean, shows, which are a little bit over budget in the wrong year don't get,
Yeah, you're either over. Right? They don't care that you're only over a little bit.
Right.
So it's kind of the last little bit. In other words, no matter how big the pot of money is, you're always going to burn through it. Right. Especially with especially with music, we still. I mean, it's somewhat indulgent, but actually the values that we had stayed consistent from CBS to HBO. We sort of carefully pick out we talk about where the songs fit with score. It's a balancing act because it's always it's a slightly awkward conversation with your composer where you're like, "Thank you, I don't need you here."
Right.
This is where I get to coast off of the power of a song that people have listened to their whole lives. It's ameliorated somewhat in Westworld because Rabin's hands are on kind of everything. None of our songs, that becomes collaborative with him as well, which is a really fun way to do it. But yeah, you do always get to a point where you've run out of money. I think that the Peggy Lee thing was about the difference in the character of the show, because you're often said, they say, sure, what's the scene?
Right.
Say, well, it's another robot skinning another robot alive.
While 3 other robots watch
Yeah.
to that song. And the lyrics are kind of about that.
Shockingly, occasionally people say no.
Yeah. Well, Jen, I mean, for Atlanta, I would just imagine also you must hit like financial minefields where a song that you thought would be $40,000 turns out to be way more because the splits are insane and somebody has no idea what it's really worth, and everybody thinks this is my chance to buy myself a new car or buy myself a new house. How do you handle those situations when they come into play, and how flexible is the production about dropping an idea that might have come in and just it's like we cannot spend our entire budget on this one song?
Well, first of all, we have amazing producers both during shooting and then afterwards that know that our music budget is never going to be what it says on paper.
It's a cute lie.
It's we're like, Oh, that's great. Thank you,
100,000.
guys. Really?
That's so charming.
That much? Oh my God, you guys shouldn't have. But we have great producers that are able to kind of work during the production to squirrel money away for us. And so we're able to do what we need to do. As far as with like the hip hop kids, I mean, I think it's actually opposite, that they just want their song in the show because they know that it is going to very much make a difference in their lives.
It will resonate.
There's so many young kids, artists that after the show aired, they've gotten admin deals, they got publishing deals, they're now collabs with, major producers. They're starting being featured on other artists. So it's such a platform. And, yes, there are some artists like Tracy that could be like, you want it, this is how much it costs, with all due respect. But for the rappers, nobody's been, and if straight up, like if anybody start being greedy, like I have no problem being like, no, absolutely not. I'm not paying this much money for this. And then they're like, okay, fine. It's like, really? For some of the kids, but they're fine. They usually come around.
Well, you guys have all, worked on projects right now that seem to be, they have reasonable budgets. I'm curious if you've been on projects where there weren't reasonable budgets and whether the job was inherently harder or was it more rewarding in a different way?
Completely different. I've worked on budgets that I had 10,000 an episode for, I think it was Burn Notice. And we had about 18 songs because we had to augment what the composer was doing. And I came in under budget. And don't ever come in under budget because they will lower your budget the next season. So the next season I had $9,000. It's really challenging, but they know that you can't what you have to get. And it was great music and people loved it. And it was up and coming artists or one stops, and people worked with us, and the show went up for 7 years with a $9,000 budget. And film is completely different, but the other TV shows, I've done a lot that were low budget. This is a dream for me to have a budget. It's like, wow. I mean, that's the easy part of it. That's like, wow, I can afford this. But it's you're working with people that are so passionate that you want to give them everything that they want. So however you have to do it, you do it. That's how I feel about it with the budget.
Yeah, I mean, I always feel like, I've worked on HBO projects where we had a proper budget, which was really exciting, and it got bigger each season, and we got to use it more. And I've been on other shows which I'm not going to mention them right now, but the budget was always inadequate, and it was always frustrating, and it was always difficult, and I would lose a lot of sleep, and my team would work ridiculous hours because it was simply not budgeted adequately, and we were in a spot where we were trying to put everything up on the screen. And part of the principle of filmmaking is you're trying to find a way to do the impossible. You're trying to take a bunch of people, find a way to tell a story against all odds and against all possibilities. And when you finally have a budget to work with, a different set of problems kind of come into play. And in many ways, as you start to shift, Jen, you had a thought you wanted to also.
I just want to say a show that I worked on, Workaholics, and we had a tiny budget, less than $9,000 an episode, and we had no composer and we had no music editor. So I went to every mix because we, had to make sure everything that got in the show, that we gave them these little bits of library music. Nothing got snuck in by our editors. I had to train all the editors. Adam, Anders, Blake, and Kyle are in edit. They have great music taste, and we had this tiny budget. And so we got to use some really cool indie bands. And so like Hudson Mohawk and Ganja Sufi. And as the years went on, the show got more and more popular, and bands wanted to be on the show and wanted to give us their music, and we started getting calls like that. And that's what's really fun. And I was so passionate about it. They gave me an office on the set, and I'd go in and I wanted to get the songs they wanted, and occasionally we'd get a big song and we'd save up our money. Because they let us save up our money for 3 episodes to get one song. And on that show, if anyone's familiar with it, every episode had something crazy going on. It was never, every scene was always like, so Adam, has no clothes on, and he's, it was every single episode
like
had
every scene description from Workaholics.
Yeah, every episode there was it was, and it was always like but it's if you had to have people get the comedy. We got denials a few times, but when people really loved it, they'd be like, "Oh my God, I love that show." And like Vanessa Carlton, I think, tweeted afterwards, it was like her favorite usage. She would have done it for free or something. So we would hear that, afterwards, but we'd be like, "Oh, great." Like it's a crazy scene. So it was fun for me because it was always fun. It was always a challenge. And same with Dan Fogelman. I end up working with people that I call him the captain of the ship, because you work for people that they work really hard, and everyone on the show works really hard, and the scripts are amazing, and the acting. You want to go the extra mile, and so when working with certain people on certain shows really helps you want to do like you said, you love working the show, you really want to work and get that song for them.
Well, when they're so passionate.
And they're passionate,
Yeah,
right.
It's the passion that people bring to the screen. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. And
You
This
see
Is
it.
Us is such a
I mean, This
beloved
Is Us,
show.
you see it,
Well, it's such a beloved show. So the part of it that's so cool for me and that's I've never experienced before is I get so many letters and phone calls and emails, and I meet people just like I'm wearing like a jacket that says this, like that's my favorite show. And then they start talking about it and they relate to a character and they understand what's going on. And then they say, I've never heard this song before. And so it's really changed my life working on a show that has changed so many other people's lives and touched so many people.
I mean, it's a neat time period too for us because in a way now fans can reach out. Like Jonathan, I imagine you must get all sorts of really interesting interpretations of like why a music choice is there, and you finally get a chance to put the songs you want in the show, and now you have some rather interesting interpretations. I mean, do you respond to those emails? Do you have time to, or do you avoid them?
I'm not on social media, so it makes it a lot easier.
Smart.
Makes it a lot easier. But no, people, I mean, it's really interesting how much people will read into it. They catch a lot. I mean, ours is a show which invites people to kind of pick it up and examine it and look at all the different...
And build their own version, in a sense.
100%. That's the most fun to me is when you read that someone has a resonance with a song that was unintentional, but very specific for them, which can be moving or cool. And that's what's beautiful about using popular music is that everyone has a relationship to it. They bring a lot of emotional baggage to it. And that's what you're doing with some of these selections. You're pressing a button and you know sometimes what it's going to do with a lot of your viewership, and that's part of the game we're playing.
Yeah, I always feel like in a way, music supervision, especially when you get a chance to have iconic music moments, is a little bit like choosing your favorite actors and saying, I want Jack Nicholson to walk in right now, and he's going to be the guy who's the bellhop, and I want to see how does everyone respond to Jack Nicholson as the bellhop. That's kind of the role we get to play sometimes. You're like, let's bring in somebody big and just see what happens in the room, and it changes the dynamic completely. It's one of the great choices.
You find the right song and you add it to picture, and there's a power. You feel it. And it's always the chill, we call it the chill test. When you finally put it up to picture and it's like, oh shit, that's the one. That's the one, and it has that. Like I said, about half the music we pick is picked months in advance, and half of it is after the fact looking at it when you've had a rough cut and you're looking at it, you're going, we knew this was a moment in which we wanted to be carried away by the music, and it's been designed to that, and the song hasn't cleared, or in some cases, songs that I've been thinking about for years and years and years, and you finally put them up to picture, and you go, oh, no, it doesn't.
Yeah,
it doesn't work the way I thought it would work at all.
Yeah, and I imagine you have to go pretty far down that road. I mean, you have to have an adaptation done. You have a lot of people trying to build these things to test out the idea to see if it's got tensile strength, if it holds up.
Well, one of the wonderful things about YouTube is that you actually, there are so many talented amateur musicians who are experimenting with songs that you can get a bit of a sense for, what does a piano version of this sound like? You can sneak preview it a little bit to get a sense for it. Ramin then goes off and does his own thing with it. We never send him the version that we've been looking at, but you can look at it and sort of get a sense for, okay, there's a hook here. There's an essential identity to this song. Like I said, the rhythm, sometimes it doesn't hold up. Sometimes you realize there's something ineffable in a song or in the recording and the quality of the recording that once it's gone in the arrangement, you no longer have the same feeling. It doesn't give you that magic doesn't happen.
Right. Well, going back to my first question, go ahead, Jen.
I was just going to say, it's funny that you mentioned that because I kind of forgot about this. We had the episode Champagne Papi, which was about at Drake's house. And we had 2 Drake songs in there. One was like a Muzak version of Passion Fruit. And then we had the Spanish cover of Hotline Bling. which is amazing, which is from the theorist who has like a huge YouTube following, that he does these hip hop covers. That's the theorist did the like the Muzak cover of like hip hop songs, and it was great. And we found it, and then Champagne Papi, the Hotline Bling Spanish version was like the script. I almost think that, I don't know if this is true, but the whole episode was because of that song, because they wanted to use that at the very end. But it was very funny listening to, a piano version of Passion Fruit and then, Spanish language. And that fam actually had to make a call for that one because Drake was being
Difficult?
Drake.
He was being Drake-ish?
He was being very Drake-ish. And his management is just, we had everybody at OVO kind of helping us out. And, but Fam, my co-music supervisor, he had to make a call, and we got to play the Donald card. But he ended up being fine with it. Super expensive, but we didn't.
Karma's a bitch.
We didn't.
So we'll
we
see
didn't
how that
MF it,
works
so.
out in the end. Let me go back to my first question. Let's talk a little bit about when you first got a sense, because you're about to go to the Emmys, which is really exciting, and you're going as an Emmy nominee.
It's amazing. It's like
So go back to the first time that you watched something, you watched Music Against Picture, and that you kind of got a sense like there's something really special about this. Can you remember a moment that kind of comes to mind?
I just remember when I was younger and I would read books. And while I was reading whatever book it was, whatever novel, we read books, not on iPads, and I would play music on my record player. And then the book would turn into a movie, and I'd go see the movie, and I'd be like, wait, they have the wrong music in there. So that was really the first time that I realized, and I didn't realize this till later in life, that I expected the music that I was listening to, that I was imagining these scenes to the music that I was listening to, and it wasn't on the screen. So that was how I first
You started to tell stories in your mind.
yeah. And music, I never didn't have music on. It was just part of my life.
Jen Pyken, do you remember?
Oh, wow.
Just that moment when you just have that smile or something, get that tingle. The first time you fell in love, you're like, this is a weird feeling. What is this?
When I was a kid, my first, my dad, he'd play records. And we'd all play instruments. And the instruments were just either made-up instruments in our house, had a really kooky mom, and we'd play the kazoo, we'd play the maracas, there'd be the spoons, and my dad would play the bongos. And my dad was really into, Santana and Trini Lopez, and he also liked, so he would play, and we would just dance around the house. And so my memories of music, my very first memory, it was so much fun. So that now that I get to work and listen to music every day as a job is like a dream come true.
You were born for the part.
And my brother, on top of it, when we were driving to school, would always play Name That Tune with me. And so he would drill me in the car, an older brother. And that was really kind of fun. And he still kind of does it. So
I want to just bring something else up. When I started working on Mrs. Maisel, the marvelous Mrs. Maisel, the music that we use, because it is of my parents' era, when I hear certain songs, I try so hard to get them in because I'm like, oh, that reminds me of my mom, or that reminds me of my dad. But when I was young, I went to camp, a sleepaway camp for 10 years. And we did all the old shows. I mean, they still do them. And I always auditioned, but I sang off key. So I couldn't get the leading roles. My sisters did, but I couldn't. But I was always in the chorus. So I knew every one of these every one of these films or film music and Broadway shows and whatever they were, all these show tunes. So now that they're in my life, it makes me so happy, and it just brings me back to my childhood. It brings me back to, wow, that was such a lovely feeling of a happy time in my life. So
and how much sort of joy from our childhood and also channeling of pain came from music and our relationship.
Fly Me to the Moon, my father sang on the piano when he was divorcing my mother.
Wow. Jen Malone, you don't have your outfit for the Emmys yet, is that correct?
No. And I was I was really excited about this. I always want to support the guild. And then you guys are like, oh, well, I have my dress, but I don't. And I don't, yeah.
Jonathan, are you sorted? Your outfit for the
Yeah.
Emmys?
Like, where do I go? If
They
there's
can.
any stylists, people like
All right, you've got resources
freaking out,
here.
you guys.
Well, let's go back to you as a little girl, though. When you first had a sense about this job, when you didn't think that you'd be looking for a dress for the Emmys, what do you think was the moment that you really felt like there's a spark here? There's something that's really exciting about this.
Well, I wasn't a little girl when I realized that I wanted to be a music supervisor.
Fair enough.
This is my second career. And I ran my own company doing PR for rock bands. And I was independent and I was in Boston and I got to wake up every day and talk to 50 people about my favorite bands. But after doing that for a very long time, I got burnt out. Like dealing with artists on a daily basis like that, no. I just got very tired and burnt out. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I kind of went through this transition period doing something else that didn't work out. And it's a long story. Anyway, a lot of shit went down. And it was around 2007, 2008 when the market went to shit. And I couldn't get a job because I had a very unique background. And ad agencies weren't hiring and I could never survive an ad agency. Like, it's just not me. And, I bought a place in Boston. And so I had a mortgage and a friend of mine was like, I was teaching yoga and that was just killing me too. And a friend of mine was like, oh, well, I can get you a job at this cafe. I was like, oh, cool. I can waitress for some cash. And I'm an awful waitress. And I got there and I was told that I was washing dishes. And so for 10 years ago, when life was I was in a really bad place, I was washing dishes. And so but still trying to figure out, I knew I had to kind of get out of where I was in. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't want to go back to PR. I didn't want to work at a label. I didn't want to move to New York. And I went to go see Iron Man, the first Iron Man. And it's just so big and so much attitude and so fun and it's just so big. And I was like, I saw the music supervisor credit and I was like, okay, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be a music supervisor. And so 9 years ago, I moved out here not knowing anything or anyone. And I just worked my ass off and I was an intern with Dave Jordan. And now I'm freaking out about getting a dress to the Emmys. So it's kind of like, it's a little bit crazy. Like, it's really crazy.
And Jonathan, you grew up under the, older brother syndrome. You were the youngest child, right? So I imagine that, you probably had to differentiate yourself from your brothers. And tell me a little bit about sort of how music became such a key part of your life.
Well, yeah, music, really more to do with my dad than my brothers. My dad was a copywriter. We had a piano. So he'd grown up in London during the Blitz. And they had a grand piano. Didn't have a lot of money, but everyone in those days, wireless was just coming in. Most everyone had a piano. They had a used grand. And they weren't in the house, but a bomb hit the house during the Blitz, and the only thing that was left standing was a piano. So from thereafter, they didn't have a bomb shelter during the Blitz. Anytime the alarms went off, my dad and my uncle, who's in some of our shows, some of our movies, and my aunt would hide under the piano. That's where they'd always be. And I remember him telling me this story, and he was an avid classical music lover, absolutely loved it. So, any given evening or on the weekends, you would find my dad standing and composing as he would listen to classical LPs or doing variations on some of his favorite pieces. We got a chance to use a lot more classical music in the second season, which I was thrilled about. We have more of an excuse to do it. And I would lie under that piano and listen to him play and watch the mechanism kind of creaking and moving and the way that it resonates, the way the sound was different from underneath it. And so when Lisa and I were thinking about sort of an icon for the show, along the lines of, you remember the Patrick Wood series, The Prisoner has this penny farthing in the opening title. I don't know what the fuck the penny farthing has to do with the show. It's not in the show. But we knew we wanted a player piano, because here's this beautiful symbol of mechanized, emotion. Music is emotion. Player piano is kind of the original Western robot. So we knew the piano was going to be a big part of it. And the concept of taking that piano and imbuing it, the sheep, sort of taking these familiar songs, kind of adapting them and variations on them, and watching this creaking machine. We have the piano just a couple blocks away in our offices. It's beautiful. It's one of sort of prized possessions. It's a player piano that we built for the show that actually works. And there's a little company that, once Ramin's done his arrangement, we have them print up the reel and it goes in the piano, and we actually play it on the set. I have a little car key thing that I can turn the piano on and off from behind the camera. And so Sean Amaro, which is the pseudonym for the music side for Supervisor for a show, was my dad's college pen name when he was writing music reviews for when he was back in school.
So this is a nod to your dad.
Yeah.
That's nice. Listen, let's have a big round of applause for our extraordinary group here. So I would like to have a last round of applause. Please, any suggestions of stylists? You know where to go. Jen Malone, Jennifer Pyken, Robin Urdang, Jonathan Nolan, our Emmy-nominated music supervisors for 2018. Oh, and a special nod to Nora Felder, who could not make it tonight, but will be joining us later. So sorry that we didn't get a chance, but yes, Nora Felder, how about a round of applause for Nora?